I spent most of my adult life working as a security guard. It's never been a glamorous job, but it pays the bills. Watching over gas stations, convenience stores, those small shops where you're just sitting in silence, keeping an eye on nothing happening. When I saw that ad for a night shift at the local mall, though, I felt a flicker of hope. Finally, something better. The pay was significantly higher than anything I'd seen in years, and the hours seemed manageable. 11 p.m. straight through to 6 a.m. One building, quiet, easy. How difficult could it possibly be? I pictured myself settled in the security office, glancing at monitors, maybe stretching my legs during patrols in that vast, silent space that felt oversized for the stillness of night. I applied without hesitation. The very next day, the manager, Mr. Hensley, called. Could I come in for an interview that afternoon? It felt rushed, sudden, but I wasn't in a position to question it. I needed the work, and the mall was close to home. Driving over, a nagging unease settled in my gut. Was the mall truly this desperate for a night guard? The interview did nothing to ease that feeling. Hensley moved through it quickly, almost mechanically. He asked about my experience, but his eyes seemed distant, unfocused. He recited the basics like a tired mantra. Check the cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, conduct hourly patrols, standard stuff. Then, abruptly, he looked up and asked, "Can you start tonight?" That stunned me. Background checks, paperwork, usually there's a process. But I swallowed my surprise. "Sure," I said, keeping my eagerness in check. He visibly relaxed, rubbing his temples like a man carrying the weight of the world. "Great, we're understaffed," he admitted, the words heavy. "Last few guards didn't last. Hope you'll be different." That last sentence hung in the air, chilling despite the fluorescent office lights. Before I could ask what he meant, he pressed a key into my hand, the key to the security office, and told me to report at 11 p.m., sharp. "Get in, get paid," I told myself firmly, shaking his hand before heading home for a few restless hours of sleep. Arriving back that night felt like stepping onto another planet. The mall was a dark monolith against the sky. The vast parking lot, usually choked with cars, was a desolate expanse under dim, humming lights. Just a few lonely vehicles sat scattered, making the space feel unnervingly large and quiet, transforming the building into a slumbering giant. A powerful urge to turn the car around and drive away surged through me. "First night nerves," I insisted, internally, pushing open the heavy employee entrance door. Hensley was waiting, his expression unreadable in the gloom. He led me through a maze of back corridors, his voice echoing as he repeated protocols, cameras, patrols, the usual. The security office was cramped, tucked away in a forgotten corner, its walls lined with flickering screens showing grainy images of the empty mall. "Check the cameras regularly," he stressed again. "Patrols hourly. Ensure nothing's amiss." Then he paused, adding with a glance that didn't quite meet my eyes, "And keep an eye on the escalators, the play area too. Things happen there sometimes." Things happen. My skin prickled. He waved a dismissive hand. "Kids, mostly, sneaking in, messing about after hours. You'll see." I nodded, though his casual tone clashed violently with the cold dread coiling in my stomach. He handed me a printed sheet of standard instructions, shook my hand with a quick, "Good luck, see you in the morning," and vanished into the shadows. The silence that descended when he left was thick, suffocating, like a heavy blanket smothering the room. I sank into the worn office chair, cycling through the camera feeds. Empty stores, still escalators, darkened hallways. For a fleeting moment, I breathed easier. Just a big, empty building. Then, a presence materialized behind me. I nearly leaped out of my skin, heart hammering against my ribs. A janitor stood there, a faint, amused grin on his weathered face. "Didn't mean to scare you, buddy," he said, his voice surprisingly light. "You must be the new blood." I forced a shaky laugh, trying to dispel the adrenaline. "Yeah, that's me. Didn't realize there was a janitor on nights." He shrugged, leaning on his mop handle. "Always one of us around, cleaning up, prepping for tomorrow." His tone shifted then, turning low and serious. "Just make sure you follow the rules." I blinked. "The rules? You mean the instructions?" He didn't smile. Instead, he pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, thrusting it towards me with unsettling intensity. "Nah, these ain't from Hensley. These are the rules. You'll need 'em if you want to make it through till sunrise." Suspicion warred with curiosity as I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a joke. The stark heading read, "Rules to keep you safe at night." Rule 1 chilled me immediately. Check the security cameras every 15 to 30 minutes. Do not stare at the footage for too long. Rule 2 was worse. Never look directly at the mannequins after midnight. If the mannequins change position, leave the area immediately. I stared at him, my gut tightening. "You're serious?" Any trace of amusement was gone from his face, replaced by something cold and fearful. "I'm warning you. Follow him, or you'll end up like the last guy." I tried to laugh it off, the sound brittle. "The last guard?" He gave a grim nod. "Quit after one night." "Okay, right." I stuffed the unnerving list into my pocket without reading further. "Well," I managed, my voice strained, "gotta make my first round." The janitor stepped aside, his eyes boring into me. "Take care," he said, the words heavy with unspoken warning. Stepping out into the main concourse past midnight felt like entering a tomb. The mall was infinitely more eerie than I'd imagined. Dim emergency lighting cast long, grotesque shadows that writhed on the polished tile with every flicker. My own footsteps echoed like gunshots in the cavernous space, amplified by the low, persistent hum of the fluorescents and the unsettling creaks and groans of the building itself, settling in the dark. I tried to focus on the patrol route. It wasn't a huge mall, but large enough to feel exposed. Stores lined the halls, some shuttered tight, others with their glass fronts revealing dark, gaping interiors, and the pale, silent shapes of mannequins lurking within displays. Near the deserted food court, the colorful plastic structures of the children's play area stood frozen and lifeless, radiating an unnatural stillness. Further down, the twin escalators rose like skeletal hands, frozen mid-ascent. I was starting, reluctantly, to adjust to the oppressive silence when I saw it. The door to a clothing store stood wide open. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness inside. At first, nothing seemed amiss. Then movement flickered at the edge of my vision. A subtle shift deep within the store. I snapped my head towards it. Nothing. Just mannequins standing sentinel in the gloom. Nerves. Just nerves. I took a steadying breath, determined not to let the janitor's creepy list get inside my head. Then I heard it. The faint, unmistakable rustle of fabric. My flashlight beam jerked back to the mannequins. One had definitely moved. It stood closer now, subtly out of alignment with the others. My pulse began to drum in my ears. "Hey, janitor!" I called out, frustration overriding fear. "This your idea of a joke?" Silence answered me. Only another soft, shuffling sound, this time behind me. I turned slowly, dread rising like cold water, the flashlight beams sweeping across the display. And there it was, the same mannequin. Its blank plastic head had turned. It was now facing directly towards the exit. Towards me. My breath caught. No prank. No one else was here. I backed out of the store, fast, heart pounding. As I retreated down the hallway, I couldn't resist glancing back. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not human footsteps. Heavy, dragging, like wood or hard plastic scraping relentlessly against the tile floor. My blood turned to ice. I spun around. It stood there, in the center of the hallway. The mannequin, staring at me with its empty, painted eyes. Every hair on my body stood on end. It lurched forward with a sickening creak of stiff joints, moving with jerky, unnatural steps directly towards me. I ran. I didn't think, didn't care how ridiculous I looked. Pure instinct took over. I bolted down the concourse, my panicked footsteps echoing madly, rounded a corner, and practically fell into the restroom hallway, slamming through the door into the men's room. The heavy footsteps behind me stopped abruptly. Leaning over the sink, I splashed icy water on my face, trying to shock myself back to sanity. It was nothing. Stress. Imagination. I looked up into the mirror. A woman stood reflected near the stalls, her back to me, dressed in a plain cleaning uniform. I blinked. She vanished. My heart stuttered. I whipped around. The restroom was utterly empty. I sank to my knees, trembling, utterly terrified. What was happening? Then I remembered the crumpled paper in my pocket, hands shaking violently. I pulled it out and unfolded it under the flickering restroom light. Rule 3 glared up at me. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, do not look back. Mannequins sometimes follow guards. If you ignore them, they'll stop. If you look, they'll know you're aware. They will get closer. I had looked. Rule 4. Avoid looking into the mirrors of the restroom. Too late. My stomach churned. I'd broken 2 rules before even understanding them. Rule 5. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned store, do not listen. I hadn't heard that yet, but the warning alone tightened my chest. Rule 6. If you hear a child laughing from the play area, leave immediately. Rule 7 struck like a physical blow. If you check the time and it is earlier than the last time you looked, immediately return to the security office. Instinctively, I glanced at my watch. 11:30 p.m. My blood froze solid. Impossible. I'd started my patrol after midnight. Time couldn't flow backward. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not just walked, ran back to the security office, the air suddenly thick and suffocating, the overhead lights pulsing faintly. The mall no longer felt empty. It felt watchful, predatory. Slamming the office door shut, locking it, I collapsed into the chair, gasping for air. My watch now read almost 1 a.m. That seemed plausible, but the 11:30? What twisted logic governed this place? I forced myself to breathe, to think. I wasn't beaten yet. I pulled the list out again, reading the remaining horrors. Rule 8. Lock the security office door between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. Do not open it for anyone. If they knock, they might not be the person you think they are. check the cameras to confirm. Rule 9. If you hear someone crying in a dressing room, do not open the door. Rule 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate. Watch the area on the security cameras. Rule 11 was the final anchor. Under no circumstances should you leave before your shift ends. If you do, you risk something following you outside the mall. A harsh, incredulous laugh escaped me. What nightmare had I walked into? Who wrote this? But the memory of the moving mannequin, the shifting time, the phantom woman in the mirror, this wasn't paranoia. This was survival. I had to endure until dawn. The hours crawled by. After the mannequin encounter, I stayed glued to the office, too rattled for another patrol, constantly scanning the monitors showing empty halls, still escalators, silent stores. A deceptive calm settled, thick with tension. Then, sharp knocks shattered the silence. Bang, bang, bang. I jumped, my heart slamming against my ribs. Frozen, I stared at the monitor showing the hallway outside the office. Empty. The knocking came again, harder. Bang, bang, bang. Then a voice. "Hey, how's the night going? Still think the rules are funny?" It sounded exactly like the janitor. I swallowed thickly, remembering Rule 8. Locked between 4 to 4:30. Don't open. Check cameras. The clock read 4:03 a.m. I checked the camera feed again. Nothing. Just an empty hallway. The knocking became insistent, pounding. "Come on, open up. I'll tell you what's really going on here." It sounded friendly, but the undertone was wrong, metallic. I hovered near the door handle, paralyzed. It sounded like him, but the cameras showed nothing. I wouldn't open it. I couldn't. The pounding stopped as suddenly as it began. Silence. Heavy, waiting silence. I stared at the monitor, unblinking. Then he appeared. On the screen. Standing right outside the door, the janitor, staring straight into the camera lens. He knocked again. His face twisted into a grotesque, impossible grin that stretched too wide. My stomach plummeted. He wasn't blinking. His image began to waver, shimmering like heat haze, dissolving into tendrils of dark mist that simply faded into the empty air of the hallway. The clock now read 4:30 a.m. It was over. For now. Exhaustion warred with lingering terror as the oppressive weight in the office lifted slightly. I stood, muscles protesting, needing to move, to escape the claustrophobic room. Stepping cautiously back into the concourse, the mall felt different, quieter, the shadows deeper. As I turned a corner near the office, I froze. The janitor leaned against the wall, that familiar, easy grin back on his face. The real janitor? He seemed solid, present. "Rough night?" he asked, his tone light, almost mocking. I stared, struggling to reconcile this man with the dissolving phantom. "You could say that," I managed. He tilted his head, the grin fading slightly. "You followed the rules, didn't you?" "I tried," I said, my voice hoarse. "What is this place? Why?" His chuckle was low, humorless, devoid of warmth. "Told you, rules keep you safe." His eyes narrowed. "There's more here than you know. Much more." I stepped back, cold dread returning. "What do you mean? What's happening?" He shrugged, the unsettling grin returning. "You'll figure it out. Or you won't. Either way." He paused, turning to walk down the dim corridor. "There's no escaping it." Desperation surged. "Wait!" I called after his retreating back. "What do you mean, no escaping it?" He didn't stop, didn't slow. His footsteps were unnervingly silent. I followed, driven by a need for answers, turning the corner he'd just taken. The hallway was empty, utterly deserted. He was gone. Again. Then I heard it. Soft at first, a muffled, heart-wrenching sobbing. A woman crying. The sound grew, echoing faintly down the deserted halls, seeming to come from a store just ahead. Rule 9 screamed in my mind. Dressing room crying. Do not open the door. Every instinct screamed to run back to the office, but the crying was a magnet, pulling at my fear and curiosity. What if it's real? What if someone needs help? I stood paralyzed, the sound shifting, becoming hollower, distorted, like a recording played underwater. Then, abruptly, it stopped. The silence was deafening, crushing. My chest tightened. I fumbled for my phone, pulling up the security camera feed I could still access. My blood turned to ice. There she was, on the camera feed from the concourse I'd just left. A woman, pale, unnaturally so. Long, dark hair hung lank over her face, obscuring her features. She wore drab, outdated clothes, and she wasn't walking. She was floating, gliding just above the tiled floor, her body hunched, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She drifted closer to the dressing rooms, then stopped, hovering near the entrance, her obscured face seeming to turn slowly towards the security camera, towards me, watching her. She began moving again, gliding silently, relentlessly down the hallway, heading directly for the security office. I watched in frozen horror on the tiny screen as she approached, the air around her seeming to warp and darken on the grainy feed. I checked another camera angle. She was closer still, her floating form drifting past shuttered storefronts, arms hanging limp. Panic seized me. I sprinted back to the office, slamming and locking the door, collapsing against it, gasping. On the main monitors, she appeared, floating down the final corridor towards the office door. She stopped directly outside, perfectly still, utterly silent. Then the knocking started. A soft tap at first, then louder, harder. Bang! 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 The door rattled violently in its frame. The pounding intensified, becoming a furious, relentless barrage, shaking the entire office. Bang! 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 I covered my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, praying for it to stop. Then, a voice cut through the hammering. "Hey, open up! It's the manager!" Mr. Hensley's voice. I froze. The clock, 6:01 a.m. Relief warred with bone-deep suspicion. Was it truly him? I checked the monitor feed pointed at the door. The pale woman was gone. Only Mr. Hensley stood there, looking exactly as he had yesterday, concern etched on his face. With trembling hands, I unlocked and opened the door. Hensley took in my disheveled, terrified state. "Rough night, huh?" he asked, genuine worry in his voice. I could only nod weakly. "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." A bitter, hollow laugh escaped me. Something like that. I didn't mention the mannequin, the woman, the impossible things. It felt insane. But one question burned. "The janitor," I rasped. "The one working nights. He gave me this list. I pulled the crumpled rules from my pocket. Hensley frowned, deeply puzzled. Janitor? What janitor? My blood turned to ice. The night janitor. He was here all night. Hensley shook his head slowly, his expression turning grave, serious. Son, there is no night janitor. Nobody works here at night except the security guard. Just you. The world tilted. The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet. No janitor? Then who or what had given me the rules? Who had warned me? I stared at Hensley, the pieces refusing to fit, the horror of the night crystallizing into something even more profound and terrifying. Without another word, I pulled the office key from my pocket, pressed it into his hand, my own hand shaking violently. I quit! The words were barely a whisper. I pushed past him, out into the gray light of dawn breaking over the empty parking lot. I didn't look back at the mall, not once. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. The image of that pale, floating woman and the janitor's dissolving grin seared into my mind. Some places hold darkness that shouldn't be disturbed. That mall was one of them. I knew with absolute certainty, clawing at my insides, that I would never, ever set foot in that place again.